Let's bring on our next change speaker on the matter of constitution, which he's no stranger to. Oliver Barker-Vormawor is a social justice lawyer with extensive professional and academic experience in international and constitutional law. Between January 2010 to December 2011, he served as a constitutional researcher and the Justice Sector Reform Advisor to Ghana's Constitution Review Commission, which was appointed by President Atta Mills to assess the strengths and weaknesses of Ghana's 1992 Constitution and to make recommendations for a possible amendment to the Constitution. Oliver's illustrious services to the Commission saw him awarded for his extraordinary services as researcher to the Constitution Review Commission, unquote. Oliver is completing a doctoral program in law at the University of Cambridge. He holds previous degrees from Harvard Law School, the University of Ghana, the University Mohammed V. Sosisi, Rabat, and the University Hassan II, Casablanca, in Morocco, as well as a postgraduate qualification in constitution building in Africa from the Central European University. Oliver currently is leading a team of lawyers and human rights field investigators and researchers to investigate the gross violations of human rights, torture, and abduction of unarmed civilians in Ashaiman by the Ghana Armed Forces. Oliver Barker-Vormawor, please, let's hear you.
Thank you, Samson and Mami, for the opportunity to join this all-important conversation. I hope you can hear me. I grew up at the feet of a father who loved to tell stories. As such, despite being the youngest on this lineup, I have with much regret picked up a habit of old men, that of convoluted storytelling. And so today I want to tell you a story. It's a story I have decided to call a constitution of our making. Like every story told by an old man, there are parts of what I'm going to say where you might not even know where I'm going with this. But stay with me. I promise it will all make sense at the end. See, the truth is, I have decided that a story rather than an academic presentation will speak better to your hearts and minds. In stating my case for a new constitution, I have chosen to speak directly to you, not at you. I have not presumed that you do not appreciate what the issues are or what the arguments on all sides are. It's been 30 years of these kinds of conversation. So you know the main proposals and the old arguments presented and represented every day. So I tell you this story only to attempt one last plea on behalf of my generation, a generation that lives today on the edges of despair. May you hear us. In 1787, the roots of a new nation were planted far away across the other side of the Atlantic. With the birth of that nation, the United States of America, humans came upon a new idea. It was something they called a constitution. In giving to themselves that constitution, these new Americans broke off the shackles of colonial Britain and made for themselves a rendezvous with destiny, a rendezvous of their own choosing and a constitution of their own making. As Abraham Lincoln would later say of that constitution eloquently, 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. It has been nearly 245 years since the American Constitution was adopted. 245. But what has America got to do with Ghana? Well, 66 years ago, our founding generation gambled for themselves to a tryst with destiny. As the Union Jack of colonial Britain was being lowered and the flag of our new nation was being hoisted up, our founding fathers also made a bet with the world. They bet that soon a time will come when our people, then and tomorrow, will show the world that the black man was capable of managing his own affairs. They captured the ambition as a desire to build a republic conceived in freedom and justice, And so we made the project of ensuring for all our people freedom and justice our national creed. Yet the project they set in motion was soon disrupted in 1966 and a couple other times until 1992. 31 years ago this month, on 28th April 1991, a little of over 3 million of our people joined queues to adopt for themselves and a coming generation a new constitution. In so doing, they hoped that they too had planted firm the roots of liberty, that they had established a framework of government which was capable of securing for themselves and posterity the blessing of liberty, equality of opportunity, and prosperity. The document they gave birth to, PNDC Law 282, or as we prefer to call it, the 1992 Constitution, is 30 years old. Apart from the Liberian Constitution of 1986, ours is the oldest in the West African sub-region. This is no doubt something many deem worth celebrating, and it is. Yet over the past few years, you have heard many young people call for a new constitution for a new generation. Their calls for us to contend with the injustices that the 1992 Constitution has created have only grown louder and gained more constituency since the idea was first championed by Face the Country, a movement I am proud to be associated with. Why? Because if anything, the 13 years we have given to the 1992 Constitution tells you that this is not a rushed decision. It shows you that we have been patient with the 1992 Constitution and we have given it enough opportunities to show us the path forward. Time and time, it has failed to deliver to us the blessings of prosperity and equal opportunity. Directly because of it, a select few prosper at the expense of all. Despite this, many continue to genuinely ask, if the American Constitution has survived 245 years and has been amended 27 times, why must we throw our 30 years of our tradition for a new constitution? Why can't we just amend ours too? After all, America is perhaps the greatest country in the world and we must follow its example of constitutional longevity. Those arguments seem compelling and in fact compelling to many. But when the story of the American Constitution is told, very often we tell it by glossing over its history. Many forget that in order to preserve that Constitution and its union, America had to fight a civil war. A war that left between 620,000 and 750,000 soldiers dead, along with an estimated 50,000 civilian casualties. The Civil War, a result of constitutional crisis, is still today the deadliest conflict in American history. The Liberian Constitution is the oldest in West Africa. Liberians have fought 2 civil wars to make their constitution the oldest in the region. Over 200,000 lives lost, over 1 million displaced, and a generation damaged for life over the traumas of those wars. This republic, our republic, does not have a civil war to give. It cannot survive another coup, another revolution, or even an Arab Spring as our president, then a candidate, used to warn us is very imminent. We may not have the incredible luck or fortunes of America to allow our republic to be pushed into a civil war or such an uprising. I assure you, we will not survive it. Now, we cannot be fixated over constitutional longevity to the detriment of how we build a just society together. All constitutions do not produce justice just because they are old. There is nothing more detrimental to nation building than a blind fascination with things considered old and untouchable. If not, we become like the abused wife who is still devoted to his abusive and alcoholic husband because she does not know how to live differently. In fact, in 1980, when Samuel Doe and a small number of soldiers overthrew President William Tolbert in Liberia, they were also overthrowing a constitution that had been in force since 1847. 1847. Let the Liberian example be our guiding post. All constitutions do not stop coups. Only a true democracy that guarantees for its citizens the fruits of justice and the equality of opportunity and prosperity. Here is the truth we are facing. Our constitution, PNDC Law 282, has lost the capacity to generate a framework for justice, or to secure for us the blessings of equal opportunity and prosperity. Its soul and spirit have been compromised by a generation of greed and decay. For 13 years, we have, with the complicity of the 1992 Constitution, built a society that thrives on exclusion and violence. A republic where soldiers can walk into and brutalize an entire community because one of them lost his yam food. Where our military, with the blessings of our president and his appointees, descend on the community with the heavy machinery our taxes paid for, to slash and maim over 2,000 people in Ashama because one of their own had been killed by thieves. And when they are done, they go to national TV in front of an impotent president and demoralize people. Where those with access and privilege, members of the ruling class, call the military secretly to congratulate them for unleashing their terror and inhumanity on us. And yet our constitution keeps silent. Speak if you are alive. Protect us if you are not dead. When those charged with giving life to a constitution can look the other way, as so many of our people hunger and die without any sense of obligation or shame, when Ghanaians are killed at will and randomly with impunity from Ejura to Techiman, when our existence as citizens is only tolerated by a political class that has not yet found a way to enrich themselves by getting rid of us, where our cry for the freedom and justice our fathers promised us is mocked, how dare you tell me that this is a constitutional democracy? We are living in an era where the pensions of our fathers and the toil of our mothers is at risk because our government will rather borrow to enrich themselves and their cousins and pursue grandiose cathedrals of doom. Where our schools are being deprived of investment and our hospitals are running out of vaccine. Where young people have no jobs. All public sector jobs are either reserved for political party foot soldiers, depend on protocol, who you know, and payment of bribe. Yet we pretend to not notice all of this. Economic despair is on the cheeks and rib cages of all except government appointees and their family and friends. We are lost as a people, and yet we are presented with no way out of this economic abyss. They told us that the e-levy was going to be the game changer. They told us if we pass the e-levy, there will be more accountability and we will reduce waste and profligacy. We warned you. Young people whose future is at stake warned you. For our impassioned opposition to that e-levy, I was arrested, tortured, and unlawfully detained for 35 days. They passed it. Then they added more ministers to their government. Complicit as always, our parliament passed that too. Today, while you slept, like a thief at night, our parliament again passed 3 new oppressive taxes. Just like the e-levy, they carried into the chambers a parliamentarian who was on his sickbed, running straight from the scene of an accident to commit another accident of history. They will continue to strip us all naked till we have nothing more to give. Many banks and businesses have been crushed to death. Today, as we knock on the door of the IMF for the 17th time, as the Vice President of America promises to send us colonial economic advisors, as the German ambassador lectures us to cut down the size of our government, and the Dutch ambassador tells us, why not Ghana beyond corruption? It is clear that we have lost the bet our fathers made to show the world that we, as the pride of Black Africa, are capable of managing our own affairs. We have lost our national pride. I assure you, this era of greed, impunity, and dispossession cannot continue forever. We must reverse course now, or we will lose this project. This experiment will fail if we do not address its inherent injustices. We cannot continue to ignore, mock, and ridicule the real pain and suffering of our people. We cannot continue to look the other way. For how long will we continue to perform democracy for foreign audiences while we live under the rule of the gun and immoral profiteering? No country forged in brutal force, underdevelopment, and economic violence has ever survived the test of destiny. This refusal to reckon with the true face of injustice in this republic will not survive forever. Now, why do I believe a new constitution is our only path forward? First, there are many people, lawyers especially, who fail to appreciate the essence of the constitution and the role it occupies in the national psyche. They see the constitution only as a legal document, and as such, they approach it with the lens of a contract or commercial lawyer. As contract lawyers, they have only one way of seeing the proposals on the table. Amend. Or why not just amend something here and there, something small so we can move on? The mistake they make is that they assume there's a constituency of people who actually believe in this constitution, and that all we need is a free textual amendment for it to work. The problem we are facing isn't one of bad or inelegant drafting. It is about restoring back faith in the project Ghana. I'm sorry, cutting and pasting here and there will not solve the problem. Secondly, there are also many who say that our constitution is perfect, and it is us Ghanaians who are bad people, and that until we fix ourselves, nothing will change. In all of my lifetime and that of those before me, I have never seen any nation built out of angels and a people without blemish. When we hear these arguments, we must pay critical attention to those who say these things. Because among that crowd are also people whose palm kernels have been cracked by the benevolence of the gluttony that this era has enabled. They have made themselves rich from the profligacy of this era of greed. Now they shift as intellectual apostles whose only aim and ambition is to preserve a status quo that has dealt very well with them. They speak as apostles of an age of disbelief. It is part of a long game designed to blame you, demoralize you in order for you to accept your circumstances. They never present you with a true and concrete plan for fixing bad Ghanaians. Instead, by making you doubt the urgency of your aspiration, by invalidating your dreams and your equal claim to reimagining a better society, they succeed in preserving the status quo. Be wary of them. But hear me, there is also among that crowd of people of genuine intent, people who understand that the demands of a constitution go beyond its text, that every constitution must be propelled not only by what it says, but also by what it does not. That no society that is without strong ethical and constitutional values can succeed. Those concerns are genuine. But this is exactly what we are advocating for. Because the constitution of a nation is much more than a simple road traffic law. It carries with it the hopes and aspirations of the people. And when they have lost belief and hope, when they are no longer compelled by the moral authority of that document, the constitution has lost its raison d'etre. It will forever mean very little to the executive that swears an oath to uphold it, and to the judiciary that is called upon to interpret it, yet undermines it at every opportunity. When we call for a new constitution, we are calling for something much more than the gathering of a few lawyers, a few Article 71 office holders, and a few friends of the regime who will huddle in the Kempinski conference room to produce for us another document without a soul. No. A new constitution is a process, not an event. It is an opportunity to rebuild our society's belief and desire for change from the ground up. We must knock on every door. We must engage every citizen, and we must implant in all of us a new belief for change. Unless we can ground the passion for a just society in the hearts and minds of people across this country, unless people accept with joy and desire this mandate to build from all of us a constitution of our own making, unless people understand that a new constitution of our own making is in fact an invitation to rebuild the moral compass of this nation, we will fail. No amendments to the 1992 Constitution, be it written in Hebrew, Aramaic, or Arabic, can wake up a consciousness and a sense of belief that is dead and gone. Finally, there are also those linear thinkers, lawyers especially, who have convinced themselves that a new constitution is technically impossible because the only path to reform is through sporadic amendments along the narrow confines of Chapter 25 of the Constitution. No constitution can legislate away the sovereignty of its people. Our constitution is not a suicide pact. It can be changed by the very people who created it. That is what the recognition of the sovereignty of our people means. Even narrowly, we are not the first country to contemplate constitutional change in the face of a constitution that makes no provision for its renewal. From Kenya through Barbados to Chile, these conflicts have been resolved to recognize the enduring and permanent sovereignty of a people over their own constitution. See, the truth is, when I speak of a constitution of our making, I do so knowing that what I am proposing has never been tried before. Our people have never truly made a truly free constitution before. In 1957, our constitution was given to us by the British Parliament. In 1960, instead of we the people, only the parliamentarians created that constitution. In 1969, 1979, and 1992, some selected representatives of people were made to negotiate for a new constitution under the hostage of the NLC, the AFRC, and the PNDC. We have never, as the people of Ghana, made for ourselves a constitution. Never in the time of a democracy have we as a people been called upon to join hands in reimagining and rebuilding our country. This is the time. We cannot view this call for a new constitution as some pet project where we assemble a few lawyers and friends of the Article 71 class to go and write somewhere. No, the stakes are too high. True constitution making goes beyond that. This is our opportunity to recapture the beauty, vibrancy, and disruption of all of Ghana, from Boku to Mampong, from those who sit aloof to those who would much rather occupy Ghana, from the heartbroken yet earnest souls who sing "Fix the Country" to the bellefools who scream "Fix yourselves" back at us. We must speak to everyone. We must engage ourselves as one people with a shared journey, despite our different devotions to the vision of freedom. We must give our people a reason to dream again. We must renew for them a vision of a Ghana that is possible, a Ghana that is daring. Give us back the Ghana that our fathers and mothers yearned for. Give us back the pride of belief in the possibility that Ghana is the greatest country in the whole world. Let us rediscover together our shared humanity, our shared values, and willingness to yearn for freedom. Together, through a constitution of our own making. Chogoye. Thank you.
You timed yourself. Thank you very much. But is this constitution dead in its soul? What will be your brief comment, Dr. Mame Mensah-Bonsu, before we take a break and return to our next guest, Ace Anan Ankuma?
Let me start by saying, wow, Oliver. That was a very powerful speech. And many of the themes that you draw out resonate with a lot of the things that other people have said, and some of the things that I'm personally very passionate about. I'm going to draw out the lines I see between what you were saying and what Brigitte was saying, for instance, that we talk about the peaceful transfer of power and the number of elections, but not the impact of the Constitution on the lives of citizens. And that is the true measure, really, of any constitution's achievements. And as one of those who have several times mentioned the age of the Constitution, I should point out that there are those who value that which is old for being old's sake. But when I talk about the age of the Constitution, what I am celebrating is the length of time in which we have not lived under a gun, and what that does for you as a people. I tell the story quite frequently of when I was 6 and I sat on a soldier's lap in a bus, and I was petrified. He asked me to sit. The bus was full, and as they did, then they would hop onto the bus and take somebody's seat. And this soldier let me sit on him when he took my seat. And it was a school bus, so he had no business on it in the first place. But when I sat on his lap, I was petrified. And when it was time to get off, I scrambled so hard I dropped my water bottle on his boot and spilled the water. And I tell you with absolutely no exaggeration that for a week after that, every day after school, I'd come and lie on the rug in the living room, waiting for them to come and get me. And I told myself that if I stayed close to the gate, then when they came, they wouldn't have to see my little sister and my family and harass everybody. They could just take me away and it'd be fine. It took over a week of them not coming for me to believe that I was going to live for having poured water on a soldier's boot. That is what I celebrate when I celebrate that we have had a constitution for 30 years. So on the one hand, age itself is not a blessing. But on the other, the fact that we have come far enough to stand here on this show and talk about this, not worrying that we'll be picked up after this program, that's something we ought not to let get lost in the conversation. Nevertheless, the Constitution's impact on the socioeconomic futures of the majority of the country has not been what we hoped it would be. And it is not right to forget that or overlook that. And the thing that Oliver says that I think is really important for us to keep in mind is that a constitution making is a process. And for me, the problem and the import of that is to say that we have the journey to undertake. So to call for a new constitution is not to say out with this one right now, because in the interim, something must function. If we do that, we will let the soldiers back in. Already they're creeping into what we consider a constitutional democracy. We see signs of it. I saw a story of the police and the army clashing at Makola. That is not a story that belongs in a constitutional state. So perhaps we're a state with a constitution that is not yet a constitutional state. And there's a lot to think about on how we make that journey. I think the call for perhaps piecemeal legislation amendment, the value in that call is that the journey towards having a proper constitution does not happen overnight, does not happen in 5 years. And if we're not going to get another document of so flawed, then we should not rush the process to a new constitution. So it's not that we should not get a new constitution, it's that the process of that new constitution is one that we must understand requires time and critically expertise. So populism seems to be quite opposed to expertise. And when we talk about, because of our history of populism, when we talk about grassroots participation, we invariably talk about talking to the people and asking everybody. And the UN, what is it called? The UNDPC, the NDPC, sorry, the National Development Planning Commission, put together a 40-year plan, which they said they achieved by consulting the people and including consulting secondary school groups. And no disrespect to the populace, but in every family, there's a role for parents. And so the idea that a new constitution must be entirely people-led is one with which I am not comfortable. Because if you look at the representatives who put together this constitution, they were more non-legal experts than legal experts. Not to say the legal experts must dominate, but I think that there's a place for expertise that does not come out clearly in much of the discussion, because we don't want to end up with another constitution with too many provisions, another constitution that gives with one hand and takes out with the other. And so the constitution making process must take time, must happen. We must involve people, and people must care when they say that they are Ghanaian, that it means something, and that is absolutely true.
All right.
In the meantime, while we're doing that, we must ask what is getting in our way now. The last comment I'm going to make is about the idea of the bad Ghanaian people. Oliver is right. It is the people who have built every country that we admire, and none of them is angelic. And our people fought for independence, the same Ghanaian people, a different generation. But they also tried something that had never been tried before, a black country, a black-run country. So yes, we can do it. But let us have no doubt about the fact that we are to blame for some of the things that we live with because we do not ask for more from our leaders. For instance, why do our parliamentarians have secret votes? We have elected people to go and represent us, and they have the power to not tell us how they use that power. And they have secret votes. And then we are surprised by the outcome. And we complain that we have now allowed the president to enlarge his government after we've complained about the size of his government. But we allowed our MPs to vote in secret. And when you put the public interest out in the open and the private interest in your heart, and then you're allowed to vote in a way that protects what is in your heart, what will happen is what is in your heart will win. And so our problems of false narratives about the good people of other places, but there are true issues of institutional incentives that we use to create bad peoples in our society.
All right. Well, Mami, I could listen to you on and over again without getting tired, but we have time to check here. Professor Ajman Bafo Ajman Dua and the others, for example, believe that Ghana's 1992 constitution was rushed. Che Mensabosu believes the same thing, and that things have to change because it was made because we're afraid that the dictator will not agree if we didn't give him enough power to appoint over 5,000 people into public service. We take a break here. When we return, Dr. Mame Abename Sabonsu will introduce our next speaker.